I've lived in Oak Ridge my whole life. It's a quiet town nestled in Westchester County, where everyone knows your name and your business. Some people find comfort in that. I find it suffocating. But I stayed. I stayed for my daughter, Lily. I'm Claire Evans, a pharmacist at the local drugstore. People trust me with their ailments, their prescriptions, and their secrets. It's a job that keeps me busy and distracts me from the parts of my life I don't want to think about, like my family. 5 years ago, I divorced Mark, Lily's father. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. He was charming, ambitious, and a liar. When the truth finally unraveled, I packed my bags, took Lily, and left. Now, at 10 years old, she's the center of my world. "Mom, what's for dinner?" she asks, dropping her backpack by the door and grabbing an apple from the counter. "What do you think about homemade pizza?" I reply, pulling out the ingredients. Her brown eyes, identical to mine, light up. "With extra cheese, of course." Lily isn't like other kids her age. She's quiet, introspective, and lives for her music. When she plays the piano, she transforms. It's like watching a different person emerge, someone fearless, someone free. "I learned Debussy's Clair de Lune for tomorrow's lesson," she says shyly. "Really? That's wonderful. Will you play it for me before dinner?" She nods and heads to the living room, her fingers already twitching in anticipation. I smile, but a familiar weight settles in my chest. No matter how peaceful our evenings are, there's always something lurking beneath the surface. Family. My parents, Evelyn and Richard, once owned the most popular Italian restaurant in town. They retired years ago, but their reputation still lingers. To the community, they're beloved. To me, they're complicated. Then there's my sister, Julia, the golden child. She's the one who could do no wrong, the one showered with praise while I was burdened with responsibility. She has twin boys, Tyler and Noah, who are as mischievous as they are adored. Lily hesitates one evening before speaking. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's this weekend?" I glance at her, surprised. "Do you want to?" "Not really, but Tyler and Noah said they got a new gaming console." I force a smile, but my stomach tightens. Visiting my parents means enduring their dismissiveness, their preference for Julia, and their complete disregard for my feelings. Still, I try. I want Lily to have a family beyond just the two of us. A few days later, an invitation arrives. My old college friend, Sarah, is getting married. She was one of the few who stood by me through my divorce. I want to be there for her, to celebrate her happiness. But what about Lily? "I can stay at Grandma's," she suggests. I hesitate. The thought unsettles me, but I can't pinpoint why. Maybe it's the years of being overlooked, the knowledge that Julia's kids are always the priority. But when I see Lily's hopeful expression, I nod. I call my mother. She's delighted, almost too eager. "Of course, Claire. We'd love to have her." The next morning, I dress for the wedding in a dark blue silk dress. My usual ponytail is replaced with loose curls, and I apply just enough makeup to feel like myself, but polished. "Wow, Mom. You look beautiful," Lily says, beaming. "Thank you, sweetheart." I press a kiss to her forehead. "Be good for Grandma, okay?" "I will." She zips up her small backpack, stuffing it with her music sheets and favorite book. The drive to my parents' house is short but heavy with memories. Their home, large and stately, feels foreign to me. I don't belong here, but Lily does, or at least I want her to. "Claire, you look lovely," my mother greets me with a broad smile. "Thanks, Mom." I glance past her at my father, who nods stiffly. "Lily, dear, we're so excited to have you." Mom embraces her tightly. "Your cousins will be here later, so you won't be bored." I crouch in front of Lily. "I'll pick you up in the evening, okay?" She nods, giving me a small smile. I push away my unease and head for the wedding, convincing myself everything will be fine. The ceremony is beautiful. Sarah radiates happiness, and for the first time in a long time, I allow myself to relax. I sip champagne, laugh with old friends, and dance. Then my phone buzzes. A message from my mother. Lily is being difficult. A pang of worry strikes me, but I brush it off. Maybe she refused to eat dinner or wanted to play the piano instead of socializing. I respond with a quick, "She'll settle down. Let me know if you need me to come sooner." I try to enjoy the evening, but something nags at me, a feeling I can't shake. A couple of hours later, I decide to leave early. The moment I step into my car, unease turns into urgency. By the time I pull into my parents' driveway, my heart is pounding. The house is quiet. Too quiet. I step inside and hear laughter from the living room. Tyler and Noah are playing their new video game, completely engrossed. "Where's Lily?" I ask. They barely acknowledge me. Then, from the kitchen, I hear the sound of running water. I follow it and freeze. Lily is standing at the sink, washing a mountain of dirty dishes, her small hands red from the hot water. Tears silently streak down her face. Sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, my mother and Julia chat casually, as if nothing is wrong. My blood turns cold. What is going on here? My voice shakes with barely contained fury. My mother turns, unfazed. "Oh, Claire, you're early." I stare at my daughter, my beautiful, gentle Lily, being treated like a servant, and suddenly, I know. This is the last time I will ever let them hurt her. I clenched my fists, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. The sight of my daughter, my 10-year-old little girl, standing there with tears streaming down her face, scrubbing dishes while her cousins played without a care, sent a surge of rage through me. "Lily, stop," I said, my voice trembling with restraint. I grabbed a kitchen towel and took her hands, drying them gently. Her fingers were red, her skin raw from the heat of the water. My mother sipped her coffee like nothing was wrong. Julia didn't even bother looking up from her phone. She needed to learn some responsibility, my mother said, with a dismissive wave of her hand. She was being difficult. "Difficult?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't want to join us in the living room, and she refused to let the twins play the piano, Julia added, still scrolling. So Mom said if she didn't want to be social, she should be useful. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm for Lily's sake. She didn't want to let them play the piano because it's hers. She worked hard for it. Julia finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "Oh, come on. They're just kids. It's not that serious." I turned to Lily, whose chin trembled as she kept her gaze fixed on the floor. My chest ached at the sight of her trying so hard not to cry. I crouched in front of her. "Go get your bag, sweetheart." She hesitated. "But we're leaving," I said firmly. My mother sighed dramatically. "Claire, don't be so dramatic." I stood up, my hands shaking. "You humiliated my daughter in her own grandparents' home, made her feel like a servant while Julia's kids did whatever they pleased. And you think I'm the one being dramatic?" Julia smirked. "It's not that deep, Claire. You've always been sensitive." I felt the familiar sting of those words, the same ones that had been thrown at me throughout my childhood. But I wasn't that little girl anymore. Lily returned with her small backpack clutched tightly to her chest. Without another word, I took her hand and led her out of the house. "Claire, this is ridiculous," my mother called after me. I didn't turn back. The car ride home was quiet except for Lily's soft sniffles. I reached over, gently squeezing her hand. "You did nothing wrong," I said. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I just wanted to practice my piano." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I know, baby." A long pause. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Do I have to go back there?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "No, you never have to go back." She nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. When we got home, I made her favorite hot cocoa, and we sat together on the couch. I watched as she curled up against me, exhausted. My little girl, who should have spent the evening laughing and playing, had been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love her. I stroked her hair, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "It's just us, okay? You and me. Always." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I recognized too well, relief mixed with sadness. "Always." I smiled, though my heart was heavy. Always. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I stared at my phone, my mother's unread messages piling up. Apologies, justifications, the usual guilt trips. I turned off my phone and made a decision. I was done. Weeks passed, and I kept my word. I didn't reach out. I didn't bring Lily back. My mother called, left voicemails filled with guilt-laced sighs. Julia sent a single text. "Are you seriously cutting us off over dishes?" It wasn't just the dishes. It was everything. Years of being the afterthought, the child expected to understand, to compromise, to accept. I wasn't going to let Lily grow up thinking that's what family meant. Without the weight of forced obligations, life felt lighter. Lily flourished, throwing herself into her piano lessons with renewed energy. Her teacher noticed, praising her progress. One evening, after she finished practicing, she turned to me. "There's a regional competition next month. Can I try out?" I smiled. "Of course you can." Her face lit up. It was the most excited I'd seen her in weeks. That night, as I washed dishes voluntarily, because no one had forced me to, I felt something strange. Peace. Then, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, expecting it to be my mother again. But when I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. It was my father. My father never called me. Ever. Something was wrong, I answered hesitantly. Dad? There was silence on the other end for a moment before his voice, weak and unsteady, came through. Claire, it's your mother. She's in the hospital. The next hour was a blur. I barely remembered the drive to the hospital, just that my hands were shaking the entire way. When I arrived, my father was pacing in the waiting room, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. What happened? I asked, my voice tight. He ran a hand through his graying hair. A heart attack. It happened so fast. I felt a mix of emotions, shock, worry, and, beneath it all, resentment. This was the same woman who had dismissed my pain, belittled my daughter, and yet, she was still my mother. Is she okay? She's stable now, but the doctors say she needs long-term care. I exhaled slowly, and his gaze dropped to the floor. I need help, Claire. The words hung between us, heavy with unspoken history. My first instinct was to say no, to remind him of all the ways they had failed me, of how they had treated my daughter. But then I thought of Lily, of how she had told me she wanted to be a nurse one day, how, despite everything, she had a heart full of kindness. Would I be doing her a favor by teaching her to hold on to resentment? I closed my eyes briefly, then met my father's gaze. I'll help, but on my terms. He nodded, looking relieved. Of course, but I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me, for Lily, for the future we deserved. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. I walked down the sterile hallways, my father beside me, his face drawn with exhaustion. He led me to my mother's room, hesitating at the door. She's awake, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. But she's different. I wasn't sure what that meant coming from him. I stepped inside. My mother lay in bed, her once sharp features softened by fatigue. Tubes ran from her arm. A monitor beeped steadily by her side. She looked smaller, weaker than I had ever seen her. Claire. Her voice cracked. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. I wasn't sure what to say. She reached out a trembling hand, but I didn't move closer. I wasn't expecting to see you. I wasn't expecting a call from Dad, I replied. A shadow passed over her face. She nodded slightly, as if acknowledging what she couldn't say out loud. My father cleared his throat. Doctor says she needs physical therapy, dietary changes, and constant monitoring for a while. I nodded. And you can't do it alone. He sighed. No. I thought of Lily, of the peace we had found away from this family, of the way she had finally started to bloom. This wasn't just about my mother's health. This was about stepping back into something I had fought so hard to escape. I'll help, I said finally, but I won't bring Lily here. And if this starts feeling like before, I'm gone. My mother swallowed hard, nodding. I understand. I wasn't sure she did. The next few weeks were strange. I drove to my parents' house 3 times a week, helping with my mother's care. I organized her medications, made her meals that fit her new diet, and sat through long, awkward silences at her bedside. For the first time in my life, she wasn't barking orders or making passive-aggressive comments. She just watched me. One evening, as I helped her into bed, she finally spoke. I never meant to hurt you. I froze, adjusting her pillow. You did. A long pause. I know. That was the first time she had ever admitted it. I sat down beside her, rubbing my hands together. Why, Mom? Why was Julia always the favorite? She sighed, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't about love, Claire. It was about survival. Your father and I were running the restaurant, barely keeping up. You were the responsible one, the one we didn't have to worry about. Julia. She needed more. I let her words sink in. They didn't excuse anything, but they explained a lot. You still should have treated me like your daughter. I know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was something. While I helped my mother recover, life outside of that house moved forward. Lily's piano competition was approaching, and she practiced every night with fierce determination. One evening, after she finished playing, she turned to me, uncertainty in her eyes. Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa would want to hear me play? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Do you want them to? She hesitated, then nodded. I think Grandpa might like it. I studied her face, searching for signs of doubt. But all I saw was a child trying to understand the complexities of love and forgiveness in a way that took me decades to grasp. "I'll think about it," I said softly. A few days later, I found myself at my parents' house, clearing dishes after dinner. My father sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. He looked older these days, as if the weight of years had suddenly caught up to him. "Dad," I said hesitantly, "Lily's competition is coming up. She was wondering if you'd want to come." His eyes lifted to mine, something raw flickering in them. "She wants me there?" I nodded. He exhaled slowly. "I'd like that." My mother, sitting in the living room, spoke up. "I'd like to go too." I turned to her. "Lily isn't ready to see you." "Not yet." She pressed her lips together but didn't argue. That was new. The night of the competition arrived. Lily was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her hair pinned back neatly. Her fingers twitched at her sides, her nervous energy radiating off her in waves. "You're going to do amazing," I whispered, squeezing her shoulders. She took a deep breath, nodding. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, her back straight, her hands steady. She sat at the grand piano, fingers hovering over the keys. Then she played. The moment the first note rang out, the entire auditorium went still. She played with a passion, a grace beyond her years. Each note carried something unspoken: years of longing, of resilience, of hope. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the final note faded into silence. The audience erupted in applause. I stood, clapping until my hands hurt. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father. He was wiping at his eyes. Lily turned toward the crowd, searching. When she saw her grandfather, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one, but it was real. Later that night, as we sat at the kitchen table at home, Lily traced patterns on the wood with her fingertips. "Grandpa said he was proud of me." I nodded. "He should be. You were incredible." She hesitated. "Do you think Grandma will ever come see me play?" I exhaled slowly. "I think she wants to. But it's up to you, sweetheart." Lily thought for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Maybe someday." I reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Whenever you're ready." She leaned against me, and we sat there in silence. I had spent years craving an apology that never came, and when it did, it wasn't enough to erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough to build something new. Not for my parents, for Lily, for me, for us. In the days after Lily's competition, something in me felt lighter. Maybe it was watching her on that stage, fully in her element, or seeing my father finally show emotion. Maybe it was just the quiet understanding that, despite everything, we were moving forward. Not fixing everything, not forgetting, but moving. One evening, Lily sat at the piano, her fingers drifting over the keys without pressing down. She did that when she was deep in thought. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I asked from the kitchen. She hesitated. "Grandma." I wiped my hands on a towel and leaned against the doorway. "What about her? She called me today." I froze. "She did?" Lily nodded, her gaze still on the keys. "She said she was sorry." I swallowed hard. "And how do you feel about that?" She shrugged, finally pressing a soft chord. "I don't know." That was fair. I didn't know either. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Mom's been different since the hospital. You should give her another chance." I stared at the screen. This was Julia, the sister who had spent our childhood basking in our parents' approval, while I had to be the responsible one. Julia, who had laughed when our mother made Lily wash dishes as a punishment. I almost didn't reply, but then I did. We'll see. It was the truth. A week passed, then two. Life settled into a new routine: work, helping my father with my mother's care, and Lily's endless piano practice. Then, one evening, my father called. "She wants to see Lily." His voice was careful, like he expected me to shut him down immediately. I almost did, but instead, I exhaled slowly. "I'll ask her." Lily took a long time to answer. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, staring out the window. Will she be different? I couldn't promise that. I don't know, but I think she's trying. Lily chewed her lip. I guess I could see her, just for a little bit. So I called my father back. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. Not overnight, not a full day, just a couple of hours. When we arrived, my mother was already sitting in the living room, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her hair, usually styled to perfection, had streaks of silver showing through. She looked older. Lily hesitated in the doorway. I placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Whenever you're ready," I whispered. Slowly, she stepped inside. "Lily," my mother said softly. "Hi, Grandma." My mother's eyes flickered with something regret, relief, maybe both. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For that day, for everything. Lily studied her. I saw the way she measured the words, the sincerity in them. "Why did you do it?" My mother exhaled, looking down at her hands. "Because I was wrong. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was honest." Lily nodded, then sat down on the opposite couch. She didn't forgive her completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she was willing to be in the same room. That was enough for now. Time moved differently after that. Lily still didn't go over to my parents' house often, but when she did, it was on her terms. Short visits, always with me there. She never stayed overnight. My mother never pushed. Julia, surprisingly, started calling more. At first I thought she was just trying to smooth things over, but then she started opening up. "Things aren't as perfect as they seem," she admitted one night over the phone. "Mike's filing for divorce." I blinked. "What?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah." Apparently, I wasn't the only one he was seeing. For the first time in our lives, Julia sounded vulnerable, not smug, not superior, just tired. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. She sighed. "I guess we both got screwed over by people we trusted." I didn't say anything, but I knew what she meant. Our parents had shaped us in ways we were still trying to understand. Before we hung up, she said, "I'm proud of Lily, you know. She's really talented." I smiled. She is. Lily's next recital came sooner than expected. She was more confident this time, less nervous. She even invited my father. My mother didn't come. She didn't ask to. Maybe she knew it was too soon. After Lily's performance, my father wiped at his eyes again. "She's special," he said gruffly. "Takes after you." For the first time in my life, I believed him. One night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she whispered, "Do you think people can really change?" I smoothed her hair back. "I think some try, and some don't, and it's up to us to decide what we do with that." She nodded sleepily. "I think Grandma's trying." I kissed her forehead. "I think so too." I wasn't sure where things would go from here. There was still hurt, still history that couldn't be erased. But maybe, just maybe, we were learning how to live with it, and that was enough. The cold grip of winter had begun to thaw, making way for the soft breath of spring. The changes in the seasons mirrored the shifts in my life, gradual, barely noticeable at first, but undeniable as time passed. Lily still spent most of her time at home, practicing piano, reading, and soaking in the small joys of childhood. She had started to smile more, not just the polite kind she used in uncomfortable situations, but real, unguarded happiness. My mother had changed too, though I wasn't sure how much was genuine and how much was simply a result of age and circumstance. She never pushed Lily to visit, never guilted me about my boundaries. I wondered if the heart attack had shaken something loose inside her, something resembling reflection. One evening, as I prepared dinner, Lily sat at the table, flipping through sheet music. She had been quiet all day, her brows furrowed in thought. Finally, she looked up. "Mom, do you think Grandma will ever come to one of my recitals?" I set down the wooden spoon I was using to stir the pasta sauce. "I think she would if you wanted her to." Lily traced a finger over the music in front of her. "I don't know if I want her there, but I want to know that she wants to be there." I leaned against the counter, considering her words. "You could ask her." She thought about it, then nodded. "Maybe." That was all she said about it that night. A week later, I got a text from my mother. "I'd love to hear Lily play someday, but only when she's ready." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't full of apologies or justifications. Just a simple statement. I showed Lily the message. She read it twice, then handed the phone back to me with a small nod. Okay. She didn't say anything else, but I could see something settle in her shoulders, a quiet understanding that, for once, she was the one in control of the relationship. Around the same time, Julia's life was unraveling. The divorce was moving quickly, but the emotional fallout was slower. She called me more often now, not with gossip or competition, but with real conversations. "I don't know who I am without him," she admitted one night, her voice raw with exhaustion. "You're still figuring it out," I said. "And that's okay." She let out a shaky laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not. But you're not alone in it. For once, Julia didn't argue. Spring arrived in full force, bringing with it Lily's next recital. She was excited but nervous, as she always was before a performance. As we sat in the car outside the venue, she gripped my hand. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I think I'd like Grandma to come next time." I squeezed her hand. "Okay." We didn't need to say anything else. The recital was beautiful. Lily played with the same quiet passion that had always lived inside her. And when she took her final bow, I could see how much she had grown, not just as a musician, but as a person. As we walked to the car afterward, my father approached. He had been to every recital since the first, sitting in the back, watching with quiet pride. "You were wonderful, Lily," he said gruffly. She beamed up at him. "Thanks, Grandpa." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Your grandmother would love to hear you play one day." Lily didn't flinch or pull away. She simply nodded. "I know." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was a step. Back home, Lily curled up on the couch with a book while I made tea. The house was warm, filled with the comforting hum of normalcy. As I sat beside her, she peeked over the top of her book. "Mom?" "Yeah?" She hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" I blinked at the unexpected question. "I think so." She closed the book and studied me. "I think I am too." I smiled, pulling her close. "That's all that matters. Life wasn't perfect. There were still cracks in the foundation, wounds that hadn't fully healed. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for things to fall apart. I was learning to build something new. And that was enough. Spring deepened into summer, and with it came the steady rhythm of change. Life no longer felt like something I was waiting to fix. It was simply unfolding, one day at a time. Lily had grown more confident. Her presence in our home no longer weighed down by uncertainty. She played piano with ease, not just for practice but for joy. She smiled more often, not just at me but at herself in the mirror, as if she were starting to believe in her own light. And my mother, she was still trying. One afternoon, as I cleaned up after lunch, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "How's Lily doing?" It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a demand, just a simple question. I thought about ignoring it. Then, after a moment, I replied, "She's doing well. She's playing in another recital next month." A few minutes passed before another message came through. "I'd love to come, if she's okay with that." I stared at the screen, my mind replaying every memory, every dismissal, every painful moment that had shaped my childhood. But I also remembered the way she had looked at Lily the last time we visited, softer than I had ever seen her. I set the phone down, deciding to let Lily choose. That night, as we sat in the living room, I showed her the message. She read it quietly, then leaned back into the couch, her fingers absent-mindedly tapping a rhythm on her knee. "She really wants to come?" "It seems like it." Lily exhaled slowly. I think I'd be okay with it." I studied her face. There was no fear, no hesitation, just a quiet acceptance of the past and a cautious hope for something better. "All right," I said. "I'll let her know." The day of the recital arrived. Lily dressed herself in a soft lavender dress, her hair pulled back into a simple braid. She was nervous, but not in the way she had been before. This wasn't fear, it was anticipation. When we arrived at the venue, my mother and father were already there, seated near the middle of the room. My mother looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lily saw her, hesitated for only a second, then walked over. "Hi, Grandma." My mother's breath hitched, and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to keep herself together. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm so happy to be here." Lily nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm glad you came." And just like that, something that had once seemed impossible became real. The recital was breathtaking. Lily played like she had the universe at her fingertips, every note flowing effortlessly. As she reached the final chords, I glanced over at my mother. She had a hand over her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. For the first time in my life, I saw her not as the woman who had hurt me, but as someone who had spent decades unable to express what she felt. When Lily finished and stood to take her bow, my mother was the first to stand and clap. It wasn't just applause. It was something more. It was acknowledgement. After the recital, we went out for dinner, a tradition Lily and I had started after each of her performances. This time, my parents joined us. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, still years of history between us, but there was something new too. Effort. Before we left, my mother turned to Lily. "You were amazing tonight. You've grown into such a talented young lady." Lily looked up at her, then did something that made my breath catch. She reached out and hugged her. My mother froze, as if unsure whether to believe what was happening, then wrapped her arms around Lily with a quiet, shaky breath. When they pulled away, Lily simply said, "See you next time, Grandma." And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother smile without reservation. That night, as Lily and I drove home, she rested her head against the window, watching the passing streetlights blur together. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." I reached over and squeezed her hand. Me, too. And for the first time in a long time, I truly meant it. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But we were learning. We were healing. Not by forgetting. Not by erasing the past. But by choosing every single day to move forward. Together. Story 2. The quiet of the little flat was broken by Emily Johnson's finger making a crisp sound on the piano. The deadline is in 2 hours. Requests for revisions from clients always arrived at the last minute. Jacob, her kid, was engrossed in a dinosaur puzzle next to her. It was like gazing into a reflection of herself as his slender fingers meticulously fitted the parts. "Look, Mom, I completed the head of the T-Rex." Emily removed her sight from the TV and looked at her son's proud expression. Her eyes and Jacob's were also brown. "That's fantastic. It will be finished with just a little more." For a minute, she forgot the stress of her job and grinned. Her phone rang at that very moment. Mom appeared on the screen. With a sigh, Emily hit the answer button. "Are you prepared for tomorrow? Don't forget to apply sunscreen to Jacob. We'll need to take him to the dermatologist once more if he gets burned as he did the prior time." There was that familiar bassy tone in Carol's voice. "Naturally, I'm prepared." Emily frowned slightly and replied, "I've packed almost everything. Have you spoken with Vanessa? She's making Ava and Lucas matching t-shirts. They will appear well in pictures." Emily shut her eyes. "Not quite yet. I'll give her a call today." Take that action. Jacob, in particular, should get closer to those kids as cousins. Spending time with kids that are more active would benefit him, in my opinion. Emily was aware of the criticism that was concealed in those remarks. Being an introvert, Jacob preferred to be alone himself, or in small groups, than big ones. This looked like an issue that needed to be resolved to Carol. "Jacob goes at his own speed, ma'am," she said in a kind but firm tone. "Anyway, at 8 a.m., we will meet in the hotel lobby. Tomorrow, isn't that right?" "Yes, exactly. Avoid being late." Emily put down her phone and glanced at Jacob before Carol hung up. She could sense the little tightness in his small shoulders, even though he was acting as though he had not heard the talk. "Did Grandma worry about me once more?" quietly he asked. Emily was occasionally taken aback by her son's insight. "Gently," she added. "Grandma just makes it her job to worry about everyone. Don't worry, however. It's going to be a great day tomorrow." She sincerely hoped so. Emily was at a horrible moment because the family's vacation to Universal Studios was scheduled months earlier as a birthday present for Lucas. An significant customer had requested an urgent conference call. It was inevitable to do business in the center of Universal Studios. Emily's cell phone rang once more. It was her sister's message this time. "I will visit at 6 o'clock. Lucas is also interested in seeing Jacob. Tomorrow, let's talk about it." "Schedule," Emily said. "All well, but at 2 p.m. I have a crucial conference call. Tomorrow. It might take half an hour or so." There was an instant response. "Do not be concerned. I'll take care of Jacob with Mom. You concentrate on your task." Emily was both thankful and nervous. Her parenting style was frequently criticized as part of Carol and Vanessa's approach of taking care of her. Jacob ought to be friendlier. He ought to engage in greater physical activity. You are overindulging him. Their counsel had been consistent ever since Emily became a single mother. She reached into the drawer, pulled out a little cell phone, and made sure it was charged. Jacob's emergency phone was this one. "Jay, tomorrow, we'll bring this with us. You may give Mom a call as soon as something goes wrong." Jacob's face was strained as he nodded. "Will Aunt Vanessa and Grandma be with me? Only for a short time? Mom will return soon." Emily gave him a hug. "In addition, Lucas and Ava will be present. My toys are usually taken by Lucas." Jacob's voice was soft. Emily couldn't help but smile wryly. Vanessa took great satisfaction in parenting her kids flawlessly. However, she saw her nephew Lucas as merely pampered. But she kept this to herself for the sake of family harmony. Emily looked at the clock as the doorbell rang. The time was precisely 6. At times, Vanessa's timeliness was handy. As soon as she opened the door, behind her, Vanessa wore trendy sportswear and a flawless blonde ponytail. Lucas and Ava lined up in denim jackets that matched. "Are you prepared?" The sound of Vanessa's voice was clear. "I am eagerly anticipating tomorrow." With a mixture of trepidation and excitement for the future, Emily threw open the door to greet her family. In silence, she prayed, "Let things go smoothly, please." Weekend tourists flocked to the Universal Studios gate in the morning. Children's laughter and joyful voices filled the air as the sun rose high. Emily followed the families of Carol and Vanessa, holding Jacob's little hand tightly. "Let's all snap a picture here to remember." Vanessa pulled out her smartphone and made a loud announcement. "Ava, Lucas, come on over here. Jacob too." The three kids were positioned in front of the camera. Jacob's gaze was a little uneasy as he glanced up at Emily. She gave him a supportive smile and gave him a little shoulder push. Grin. Vanessa took a number of pictures, then looked at the screen and gave a satisfied nod. "Excellent. I'm able to create excellent Instagram posts." Emily checked her watch. 10 a.m. in the hours leading up to the conference call. Should we visit the first point of interest? Carol started guiding the family after unfolding the map. First, let's see the well-known sites. In the afternoon, wait times increase. The party reached the first attraction after moving through the theme park. Despite the 45-minute wait time being posted, the kids' enthusiasm remained unwavering. For months, Jacob and especially had been anticipating this attraction, which would include his favorite anime characters. "Look, Mother." He stood in line and gestured at drawings of figures on the wall. They appeared so authentic. Seeing her son's happiness made Emily feel warm within. Usually reserved and silent, pure delight was beaming in Jacob's eyes. Right now. The party entered lunchtime while ordering from a restaurant in the park after visiting 2 attractions. Emily's phone started to vibrate. She scowled as she looked at the screen. "I received an email from the customer. We have rescheduled the conference call for 1:00. She checked her watch. "It's 12:30 already. Do not be concerned." Carol held out her hand. "Jacob will be looked for by us. You concentrate on your task." "Yes, exactly," Vanessa concurred. "In any case, our next destination was Splash Mountain. You'll like spending time with Ava and Lucas, Jacob." Emily gave Jacob a worried glance. Her absence appeared to worry her son. "Are you all right?" Gently, she asked Jacob. "It will only last for a short time. I will return shortly." Slowly, Jacob nodded. "Quickly return." To make sure the emergency phone was in his pocket, Emily looked. "You may reach me at any moment using this." Carol gave a little laugh. "Try not to worry too much. We'll be keeping a close eye on him." Emily inhaled deeply. "Okay, it should not take more than an hour, in my opinion. Let's choose a meeting location. Let's meet near Splash Mountain's exit," Vanessa recommended. "We'll most likely be around the end of the ride, or still in line." After giving Jacob one more kiss, Emily walked out of the restaurant to find a quiet spot, locating an area where there is less noise. She started getting ready for the conference call by opening her laptop. The customer appeared pleased with her design concept, and the meeting went as planned. Emily concentrated, clarified, and addressed inquiries on the next course of action. The clock showed that it was already 1:45. That brings my explanation to a close. With grace, she closed up. "Have you had any inquiries?" The client had questions for a few minutes, and she politely responded. The clock read 2:00 at the conclusion of the meeting. Emily shut off her laptop and looked at her phone. No alerts. As promised, her family was undoubtedly at Splash Mountain. Her phone vibrated in her pocket from an unidentified number as she started to go in the direction of the attraction. No. Her heart leaped as she recognized it as Jacob's emergency phone. "Jacob," she said, her voice brimming with nervousness. "Mom." A little voice faltered. "I'm alone myself." Despite the commotion surrounding her, Emily paused, feeling as though the world had frozen. Where? At the Universal Studios entrance, she let out a gasp. Jacob was about to burst into tears. "Grandma abandoned me." Emily's mind was filled with alarms. "Stay put. Remain there. I'm on my way now." She rushed to the park gate, navigating the crowds. She called Carol at the same moment. "Mom? Jacob is where?" Her voice was a combination of dread and rage as she demanded. "Oh, Emily." Carol's tone was too subdued. "Jacob, Ava, and Lucas are having fun at Splash Mountain." "No," Emily yelled. I just got a call from him. At the park entrance, he is alone. There was a pause before Carol responded in a perplexed tone. That isn't possible. He was with Vanessa, the first thought. You weren't with Jacob? Emily's tone faltered. I left him with Vanessa since he refused to go on the attraction. Carol's speech faltered. Neither was she with him. Jacob is by himself at the door. Emily's rage was out of control. How did this occur? Don't worry so much about it. Carol added a chuckle to her statement. For a few hours you'll be all right. We'll locate him shortly. Disbelieving, Emily hung up and then contacted Vanessa. I'm busy now, Emily. Lucas has to use the restroom. Where is Jacob at the moment? Emily cut me off. He's with Mom, right? Vanessa gave a brief response. No. At the park entrance, he is by himself. What? After a moment of confusion, Vanessa snorted. My children, however, would never be abandoned. I can't look away from them. After hanging up, Emily dashed through the masses to the door. When she eventually spotted the entrance gates, her heart felt like it would burst from her chest due to its rapid pounding. She saw Jacob, a little figure, seated on a bench, sobbing and clutching his knees. With a shout, she ran to her son, Jacob. When Jacob saw his mother, he instantly got up and sprang into her embrace. Mom, he sobbed as he held her. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Emily embraced him close. It's all right. Mom has arrived, she muttered. I will never abandon you again. At that moment, she saw a uniformed man coming. The security manager is myself, Michael Foster. The man held out his hand to Emily and introduced himself. His demeanor was kind but professional. Your youngster was sobbing, so one of our employees called me. Emily still held Jacob in her arms as she shook Michael's hand tremblingly. My name is Emily. I'm so sorry. My sister and mother. She stammered out what she was saying. The issue looked more absurd the more she attempted to explain it. Michael gave a nod. In an understanding manner, let's go somewhere where you can relax. He pulled out a little radio and gave instructions. Set up a VIP room, please. They were led to a peaceful chamber behind the park's scenes. The space had toys suitable for Jacob's age, chilled beverages, and cozy couches. Do you want some water? Emily questioned her son. Jacob took a drink of water and gave a little nod. He was no longer weeping, though his eyes were red and puffy. Jacob, could you please tell us what happened? Michael said softly as he sat down on the couch. When Emily gave him a supportive nod, Jacob turned to face her and started talking in a low voice. I didn't want to ride the large roller coaster, even if I was with my grandmother. I was afraid until Michael softly prodded me. Then wait here, Grandma said. However, Lucas, Ava, and Anthony accompanied her. He stumbled. I waited, but nobody returned. Emily's chest constricted. What was the duration of your wait? I'm not sure. A long time. Jacob's voice became softer. Many individuals passed by. I had seen it previously, so I walked to the entrance because I was afraid. With a look of understanding, Michael nodded. That was a pretty wise choice. Jacob, going to a well-known location or a spot you've gone previously is the best course of action when you're lost in a busy area. Emily gave Jacob a gentle head rub while she told Michael what was going on. She informed him about the terrifying phone call she received at work, leaving her son with Carol and Vanessa. Don't make such a big deal, my mother said, as well as my sister. She made an effort to control her rage. My children will never be abandoned, she assured me. Michael's face became stern. For a youngster of Jacob's age, being by themselves in an amusement park is a highly hazardous circumstance. I understand, Emily apologized. I ought to have exercised more caution. You are accountable, Miss Johnson, and you provided your child with an emergency phone. Jacob's safety today was guaranteed by it, Michael replied in a comforting tone. Your family members are to blame since they failed to keep an eye on Jacob. Emily inhaled deeply. She was at last able to quit blaming herself. Michael got to his feet now and grinned. I want to do something special to make up for this horrible experience. Jacob raised his head with interest. Michael proposed that I treat you like VIPs today. What about a tour behind the scenes? Special character greets and priority boarding on attractions. Jacob's gaze brightened. Really? Emily was really appreciative. It's so kind of you. However, specific treatment is not required. No. We take pleasure in providing the greatest possible experience for our guests. Michael grinned, particularly for visitors who have gone through what happened today. An hour or so later, Michael was leading Emily and Jacob as they strolled around the park's backstage area. Jacob gazed around with excitement. wearing a unique VIP badge on his breast. According to Michael, ordinary guests are unable to see this section. It is behind the scenes of the attractions and films. Jacob's favorite characters were photographed when they went to the character costume room. After that, they took advantage of priority lanes to experience attractions that would often need hours of waiting. Jacob was a happy 6-year-old again, and his grin had returned. Seeing her son's change made Emily happy, so she pulled out her phone to take pictures of their unique moment. "Look, Mom." Jacob indicated a control room for attractions. He was listening to Michael describe the control panel. "Fantastic." Emily snapped a picture to document the event while grinning. She accessed Instagram casually and browsed the latest pictures. Then she started posting on the spur of the moment. With the description, "A tragedy of my son being left behind turned into a special memory." She posted a picture of Jacob grinning broadly and sporting a VIP badge. She also included a brief explanation. "My 6-year-old kid was abandoned at Universal Studios today. It is impossible to describe the anxiety he felt when he contacted me in tears after his family had abandoned him. However, the tragedy was turned into a fantastic event by the amazing people of this park, particularly security manager Michael Foster. The toughest circumstances can occasionally turn into the most memorable ones." After pressing the publish button, she put the phone back in her pocket. They spent the following few hours at the park. Every now and again, Michael joined them, still offering unique experiences. Excitedly, Jacob dashed from attraction to attraction, forgetting his weariness. Emily's smartphone started vibrating nonstop. At 4 p.m., people were sending in notifications. A surprising amount of people were responding to her Instagram post concerning messages from pals. Strangers were offering them support, and parents with comparable situations were showing understanding. The fact that the message had been shared hundreds of times and was starting to be featured by local news websites, however, shocked her the most. "What's the matter?" Observing the shift in her demeanor, Michael inquired. Emily responded bewilderedly. "My post seems to be spreading quite a bit." "I didn't mean to do that." Michael gave a nod, in an understanding manner. Real-life situations can occasionally be relatable, particularly when there is a happy conclusion. Emily was reviewing her other alerts when Vanessa sent her a message. "I came across your post. Immediately delete it. In the comments, everyone is denouncing us. I was called by friends who claimed that we had abandoned the child. How did you accomplish this?" After taking a deep breath, Emily felt empowered to stand up for herself for the first time. "What is your next destination?" Grinning, she questioned her son. Jacob gestured enthusiastically toward the next attraction. She put her phone in silent mode and disregarded Vanessa's message. It was time to spend time with her kid. She believed that Carol and Vanessa needed to own up to their mistakes. Carol sat on a park seat and used her shaking fingers to browse through the screen of her smartphone. Emily's message sparked an abundance of empathetic reactions on social media. But more than those remarks, she was struck by harsh remarks made about her. Vanessa was beside her, checking her own phone and nervously chewing her fingernails. "My PTA buddies are discussing this as well." Vanessa's voice sounded dejected. "Tomorrow, I can't reveal my face." "Try contacting Emily again," Carol urged as she looked up, her eyes watering. "She'll listen, no doubt." 3 calls from Vanessa had already been sent to Emily's voicemail. With a groan, Vanessa ended the call. "Mom, it's useless. She is not paying attention to us." "How could it?" Carol held her head. "Only half an hour has passed. We were riding Splash Mountain at the time. I assumed he could wait because he was afraid." Softly, Vanessa said, "We didn't verify who was keeping an eye on Jacob. Mom believed that I was observing him, and I believed that Mom was observing him. We are both accountable for this." Strangely, Carol could not think of anything to say. She'd always thought she was correct. Excuses were not an option this time. "We must locate Emily." She got to her feet. "I'll say I'm sorry." The two started to stroll around the park. It was difficult to locate Emily and Jacob among the throngs of people. They navigated from attraction to attraction while examining the map. Vanessa halted abruptly and gestured toward the VIP gate leading to the Minion attraction. In fact, Universal Studio employees were using a separate entry to let Emily and Jacob in. Jacob had a gleaming VIP badge on his breast and was grinning. "Come on." Carol started to move quickly toward them, but the attraction's entrance closed before they could get near. The wait time indicator indicated 40 minutes, but the two went to the usual entrance and lined up. "This is too long for me to wait." Vanessa felt annoyed. In addition, I have to locate Lucas and Ava. Surprised, Carol turned around. What are you saying? They're where? Vanessa's cheeks flushed. They claimed to want ice cream, as we were waiting in line for the speed racer attraction. I handed them money and told them to return immediately. Vanessa, Carol cried out. You left the kids alone. I didn't leave them behind. Vanessa grew defensive. Their ages are 5 and 8. I was planning to return immediately because the ice cream vendor was right there. Carol let out a sigh. What time is it right now? 4:30. More than an hour has passed. The two looked at one another, and instantly the same awful idea came to them. They started racing in the direction of the ice cream shop. Ava and Lucas were nowhere to be seen when they got there. With a look of terror on her face, Vanessa looked around. Ava? Lucas? She started yelling. When the stand's clerk saw the two, she said, May I assist you? Have you had a look at my kids? A 5-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. Vanessa's voice trembled. As though recalling, the clerk gave a nod. Indeed. About an hour ago, they were present. A staff worker escorted them to the Lost Children's Center after they purchased ice cream and waited for long without anybody picking them up. I believe Lost Children's Center, Carol and Vanessa said at the same time. It is located in the park's middle. The map was indicated by the clerk. Your kids ought to be present. Along the way, the two rushed to the Lost Children's Center. Vanessa understood the gravity of what she was doing. She had always portrayed herself as the ideal mother, yet she had made the same error now. They told the woman behind the counter what was going on. When they got at the Lost Children's Center, the woman nodded and looked at the computer. Indeed. Lucas Perry and Ava Perry are here. She indicated a room inside. But wait, please. The security manager would want to talk about the matter. Vanessa, the security manager, was perplexed. Michael Foster showed up a few minutes later. He looked sternly at Vanessa and Carol. Perry, miss. I'm Michael Foster, the park security manager, Miss Williams. Today, he gave his introduction. Your family has reported 2 significant events to us. Vanessa stammered as she said, Please allow me to visit my kids. Michael said calmly, Of course they are safe. However, it is quite risky to leave kids alone in a theme park, particularly when it comes to little ones like Lucas. Carol's lips opened, then shut again. She recalled what she had said just hours before. Don't worry so much about it. We sincerely apologize, she stated in a quiet voice. Michael gave a nod. In the play area, the kids are interacting with the personnel. Please come this way before you go visit them. He guided them to a side monitor. Emily and Jacob were enjoying a backstage tour on the screen. Emily was attentively observing Jacob as his face was bursting with sheer excitement. Michael said, We're giving Miss Johnson and Jacob a unique VIP experience. We want them to make positive memories after needless trauma. Today, Carol and Vanessa gazed at the TV in silence. They had never seen a picture of Emily and Jacob before. In their own universe, a mother and kid are content. Are they trying to find us? Vanessa's voice was small as she asked. Michael gave a soft smile. No. Now, they are relishing this unique moment. Carol's eyes were watering as she spoke. Emily is an amazing mother. I misjudged her. Vanessa acknowledged that her perception of herself as the ideal mother had totally fallen apart today. Should we now see your kids? The two were persuaded by Michael. Upon entering the play area, Ava and Lucas rushed forward. Vanessa knelt and gave them a firm embrace. She sobbed as she stated, I'm sorry, Mommy was wrong. Where have you gone, Mom? I was afraid, Lucas answered softly. Ava took a sidelong glance at her mother. We learned from the park lady to seek out an adult or speak to a person in uniform if we get lost. Jacob, what happened to him? When her kid asked a question, Vanessa was at a loss for words. Carol stepped in and clarified that Jacob was with his mother. Later, we'll visit them. Emily and Jacob will be waiting at the park exit at 6. Oh, Michael stated softly as he walked up to Carol and Vanessa. You should go there if you wish to meet them. After thanking the kids, the two departed from the play area. What should we do, Mom? Vanessa inquired. Carol inhaled deeply. We will meet Emily and offer our heartfelt apologies. The only thing we can do is that. Vanessa gave a nod. For the first time today, she realized how frail her mother appeared, and she had to acknowledge that she was as weak. Taking the kids' hands, the two started to move in the direction of the park's exit. Lucas scowled and said the words yuck when I added gummy bears to the pizza. Vanessa laughed as she wrapped up her tale. Everyone at the table chuckled. Since the incident at Universal Studios 3 months prior, Sunday family get-togethers had taken place every week at Emily's apartment dining table. "Could you describe that day to me, Mom?" Emily was questioned by Jacob. "How did you get to know Michael?" Emily gave her son's hair a gentle pat. "Because you summoned me with courage. Michael became the hero of the day." Carol held her coffee cup and grinned softly. She has progressively changed since she started going to counseling to mend her connection with her grandson. Critical terms had disappeared. Rather, her attitude was one of compassion and support. Since then, Jacob has delighted in accompanying me to the museum, Carol added softly. "We visited a dinosaur display last week. It was a lot of fun." Jacob had glistening eyes. Grandma committed every dinosaur name to memory. Emily was appreciative of her mother's newfound friendship. Carol stopped criticizing the way she raised her children. Rather, she had learned to appreciate and acknowledge her strength. Vanessa had also undergone a dramatic transformation, removing the facade of the ideal mother. She was now more modest and honest. "Next week, would you want to attend the PTA meeting together?" Emily was asked by Vanessa. "Please see my lecture on how to learn from mistakes made as a parent." Emily gave a joyful nod. "I would adore doing so." The doorbell rang after the lunch, and Emily answered it as the kids started playing games in the living room. Michael Foster held a bunch of flowers in front of him. "I apologize for being late," he grinned. "The work took a long time." Michael has been a part of Emily's life since that day. Over time, their friendship became stronger, and they were now going on dates many times a week. "Michael is here, Mom." Running, Jacob leaped into Michael's embrace. He loved his idol with all his heart. "Champion, hello!" Michael gave Jacob a high five in greeting. The sight of it warmed Emily's heart. She had no idea how many blessings would come from that day's awful occurrence. Family ties have been restored and strengthened. She was a single mother a year ago, and her mother and sister were often criticizing her. She was now a member of a family that valued and helped one another. As she brought a chocolate cake from the kitchen, she said that dessert time had arrived. "Let's celebrate fresh starts." The sound of glasses hitting reverberated around the room as they were elevated. The most necessary adjustments can occasionally be brought about by the most unexpected situations. Emily had discovered it, and her family had also been taught the same lesson. Story 3. It's only a Thanksgiving celebration. Mom told me to get over it. I knew then that I was nothing. All right, Mother. Her number was blocked by me. They switched strategies 2 weeks later. I was constantly aware of my position within the family, the one that was overlooked, the youngster in the middle, not gifted enough to receive recognition, not young enough to be coddled, just there, living in the shadow of the genius of others. Mason, my older brother, was the best kid. Perfect grades, sports scholarships, the type of boy parents boast about at neighborhood barbecues. My younger sister, Emma, was the infant spoiled, protected her, every tantrum eased with presence and love. And then there was me, Noah, the one they only seemed to recall when they needed something. For years, I convinced myself I was imagining it, that the knot in my gut every time they ignored my triumphs was just insecurity, that the hurt in my chest when they canceled our plans was merely misplaced disappointment. Those families had their ups and downs, and ultimately they'd notice me. I was mistaken. The truth hit me on Thanksgiving Day, a reality so raw and clear that it demolished the carefully crafted lies I'd been telling myself for 28 years. My phone rang that morning with a text from my mother. The screen lighted with her message. "No way, honey. We're canceling Thanksgiving dinner this year. Money's tight, and we just can't handle it. We'll do something tiny next month to make up for it. Love you." I gazed at those words, an empty feeling creeping across my chest. Money's tight. The identical justification I'd heard numerous times before. The same reason I'd been giving the money every month for the last 3 years to help out. To be a good son. My fingers hesitated over the computer, ready to react with understanding, ready to provide more money, ready to once again be the solution to their concerns. But something stopped me. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the culmination of years of disappointment. Whatever it was, I planned to drive by their house that evening simply to check in, maybe bring some takeout to share since they couldn't afford a real supper. The knot in my gut grew as I pulled into their street. Something felt odd, and then I saw it. Their driveway packed with automobiles. My brother's sleek BMW, my sister's red Jeep automobiles I recognized as belonging to aunts, uncles, relatives. My hands clenched the driving wheel till my knuckles became white. They couldn't be. They wouldn't, but they had. I parked across the street and walked up to the home. The windows sparkled with pleasant light through the opening in the drapes. I could see them, all of them gathered around a table heaped with food, turkey, stuffing, my mother's wonderful pumpkin pie, laughter, togetherness, everything a Thanksgiving should be. Everything I'd been told was impossible this year. My breath caught in my throat. The treachery hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't canceled Thanksgiving. They had just canceled me. I don't remember pushing the doorbell, but I must have, because immediately the door flew open and my mother stood there. Her grin wavered when she spotted me. Not guilt, not shame, just displeasure at the interruption. "Noah, what are you doing here?" I couldn't talk. Over her shoulder, I watched the dining room fall. Silent faces turned toward the entrance. Surprise, discomfort. My father partially rose from his seat at the head of the table. "I got your SMS," I eventually managed to utter, my voice sounding weird, even to my own ears, about canceling Thanksgiving. She blinked, collecting herself swiftly too fast, like she prepared for this possibility. "Oh, there must have been a misunderstanding. I meant we were canceling our arrangements with you. We planned to do something simple, just family. Just family." Those words rang in my brain, just family. What was I then? "I am family," I said, the words stinging my throat. She had the grace to appear ashamed, but not sorry. Never sorry. "Of course you are. Honey, it's just you know how it is. Mason brought his new girlfriend, and Emma wanted to bring some buddies from college. We didn't have room for everyone. Didn't have room. Save they had room for extended relatives, for my sister's pals, for everyone save me." I peered beyond her into the dining room, where my existence as the neglected son was on full display. Mason caught my eye and had the guts to lift his glass in my way. A sarcastic salutation. That's when I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. They decided to exclude me, and they weren't even sorry about it. I turned without further word and headed back to my car. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name. Her voice carried the rehearsed worry she used when others were observing. But she didn't follow me. No one did. The journey home went in a haze. My memory replayed years of identical misconceptions. Birthdays where my gifts were plainly afterthoughts. Family trips I learnt about through social media posts. The persistent repetition of, "We thought you were too busy," or "We didn't believe you'd be interested." They hadn't wanted me there. They had never wanted me there. When I reached my apartment, I sat in my parked car, unwilling to move. The truth of my family's treachery overtook me. But with the anguish came clarity, crystal clear knowledge of how I'd been used for the last 3 years. I'd been sending the money, assisting with bills, watching Emma's son when she needed a break. Just previous week, I'd put down a deposit on a car I was hoping to buy for Christmas, a solid SUV to replace their outdated minivan. And all along, I'd been nothing to them, an ATM, a convenience. My hands trembled as I got out my phone and dialed the dealership. The salesperson was shocked to hear from me so late on Thanksgiving. "I need to cancel that purchase," I said. "Something's come up. The family SUV. But you were so thrilled about surprise them," he said, confusion obvious in his voice. "Plans change. They won't be needing it after all." I hung up and eventually walked inside. My apartment felt emptier than usual. The stillness crowded in around me, reminding me of my alone. But for the first time, that loneliness seemed like a choice rather than a sentence. That night, I made a decision. I was done being there. Safety net. Done being the forgotten son who still showed up with his wallet open. Done pretending. We were a family, when obviously I was simply an outsider looking in. The calls started the next morning. My mother first, her voice lovely and worried, wondering why I'd gone so suddenly, asking if I was feeling poorly. Not once admitting what they'd done. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father, harsh and to the point, "Your mother's unhappy. Call her back." Delete. Mason. Emma. Even my grandma attempted to make me feel terrible for creating a scene. I switched my phone off and spent the day in calm solitude. For once, I didn't rush to smooth things over. Didn't hurry to be the understanding one. Didn't apologize for feeling wounded. The main storm erupted 3 days later when I didn't show up at Sunday dinner. A custom I'd observed consistently, even when it meant missing other chances. even when it required driving. 2 hours after a long day of work, even when no one appeared to care if I was there or not, my mother called again. This time I responded, "Where are you? Everyone's waiting. No. Hello? No. How are you?" Just frustration that I had broken their routine. I just said, "I'm not coming." "You mean you won't be coming?" "Dinner is being served on Sunday. I am aware of the day. I haven't come yet." A pause occurred. She was practically planning her next move, the kind of manipulation that would typically be effective on me. "The condition of your father is not good. He wanted you." My throat constricted. The old guilt surfaced, trying to strangle me. How many times had they kept me under control and made sure I followed orders by using my father's health? "Take him to the hospital, if he is so ill," I answered, astonished at my composure. "Mason can definitely drive him." "No. How could you be so self-centered?" I chuckled after all that we had done for you. I was unable to resist. Her statement's ridiculousness caused me to lose my cool. "Mom, what specifically have you done for me? Apart from lying to me? Apart from excluding me? In addition to making me feel unimportant?" "That is untrue. You're exaggerating. If Thanksgiving is at issue. There was a misunderstanding, I told you." "There was no miscommunication. I wasn't supposed to be there. Admit it. Quiet." It's the silence of someone whose manipulations have failed, not the silence of guilt. For whom is recalibration necessary? "All right." At last, she spoke in a chilly tone. "Act as such. But when you need something, don't come to us in tears." I understood the irony of what she said. When had I ever needed anything from them? How long had they been there when I required them? "Mom, goodbye." I blocked her number after hanging up. Then, in an attempt to control me, I blocked each of them individually, obstructing their paths to me, to cause me to question myself. It was shockingly simple. It seemed like I was finally letting go of a burden I had been carrying for years. The flying monkeys showed up the next week. Friends, family, and distant cousins called to express their disappointment with my actions, how I was hurting my mother, and how family should always work things out. After listening courteously, I blocked the two of them. They switched strategies 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. They started contacting people one-on-one, rather than in groups, and leaving irate voicemails. Each of them played a specific part in their deliberate and strategic attempt to entice me back. At first, my father was strict and text brief. "Give me a call." He arrived at my flat when I didn't reply. His face twisted in a mix of rage and shock that I would dare to disobey him, as I stared through the peephole as he hammered on my door. "I know you're in there, Noah. Now open this door." My heart pounded in my chest as I stood quietly on the opposite side. The Noah was gone, but the previous Noah would have opened the door and offered an apology for things that weren't his responsibility. He departed after 15 minutes. A message slid under my door. "Your behavior is unacceptable. Your mother is sad. This isn't how we raised you." I crumpled it up and threw it away. The next day, Mason called from a number I hadn't blocked. I responded, not recognizing it. "Bro, you need to get over yourself," he stated without prelude. "So you skipped one supper. Big deal. Mom's a mess and Dad's on the warpath. And you care because I asked," my voice firmer than I felt. He laughed, that patronizing voice I'd learned to despise. "Look, we all know you're just doing this for attention." Mission completed. Now quit being a drama queen and apologize to Mom and Dad. Is that what you believe this is about? Attention. What else? You've always been oversensitive. Remember when you threw a fit? Because I got a vehicle for graduation and you didn't? My throat constricted. I didn't get anything for graduation. Not even a card. "See? Oversensitive," he remarked, as if he'd proven his point. "Just grow up and come to Sunday supper. This family doesn't operate when someone's upsetting the boat." "Maybe it's time someone did," I answered and hung up. Emma was next, her approach gentler but no less cunning. She arrived up to my job during lunch, her son in tow, using the child as a shield, knowing I wouldn't create a scene in front of him. "Uncle Noah," he wailed, racing to embrace me. Despite everything, I hugged him back. None of this was his fault. Emma's eyes were calculating as she studied our connection. "He misses you," she said. "We all do." "Do you?" I asked, honest inquiry in my voice. "Or do you miss what I did for you?" Her expression stiffened slightly. "That's not fair. We're family." "Family?" The first repeated the word hollow on my tongue. That term appears to mean something different to me than it does to the rest of you. Noah, you're being silly. So you weren't asked to one dinner? Get over it. I crouched down to my nephew's level. I have to go back to work now, friend. It was lovely to see you. As I moved away, Emma yelled after me. Mom needs help with the mortgage this month, and I was hoping you could watch him this weekend. I have plans. I didn't turn around, didn't answer. Her genuine objectives exposed in those two statements, more plainly than any explanation I could have provided. My grandmother's approach was the most pernicious. She delivered a package to my apartment with old photographs, a homemade letter I'd given her when I was 6, a little toy soldier that had been my favorite. Attached was a message in her unsteady handwriting. Family is all we have in the end. Don't throw yours away over pride. Pride. As if standing up for myself after years of abuse was nothing more than bruised ego. As if asking to be treated with fundamental respect was asking too much. I threw the images away, but kept the toy soldier a reminder of the young kid who had fought so hard to be loved. The final onslaught came from my mother. She left increasingly urgent voicemails on my work phone, the only number she could still contact. Noah, please call me back. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. Your father's blood pressure is over the sky due of your conduct. If something happens to him, I hope you can live with yourself. Why are you punishing us? What did we ever do but adore you? Each communication twisted the knife more, exposing just how unable they were of seeing their own acts, of admitting the suffering they had caused in their story. I was the villain, the ungrateful son, the troublemaker. The last message she left was the most telling. Her voice was chilly. The facade of maternal concern evaporated totally. All right, act as such. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've thrown away. Mason's been offered a partnership at his business, and Emma's pregnant again. Life moves on, with or without you. We're still a family, even if you choose not to be part of it. A threat disguised as information. See what you're missing. See how we're just fine without you. But all I heard was affirmation, confirmation that I had made the proper option. That going away wasn't just an option. It was the only choice if I ever wanted to recover. So I deleted the message and all the ones that came before it, one by one, removing their voices from my life, just as they had eliminated me from theirs long before. And I left, walked out of the home and back to my car, a peculiar lightness in my steps. Behind me, I could hear my mother weeping, my father yelling the old music of guilt and deception. But for once, it didn't draw me back. That was 6 months ago. In that time, not one of them has apologized. Not one has recognized what they did or sought to make apologies. Instead, they've cast me as the villain in their tale, the ungrateful son who abandoned his family over a small misunderstanding. I know this because mutual friends still tell me stuff. How my folks play the victims. How Mason and Emma spread falsehoods about my mental health concerns. How they've rewrote history to free themselves of any responsibility. But I don't care anymore. I'm free. Free from the continual disappointment. Free from the one-sided gifting. Free from the persistent hope that sometime, somehow, they might truly notice me. I've reallocated the money I used to give them toward my future, started treatment to disentangle the chains of guilt and obligation. They tied in me, built stronger ties with friends that genuinely respect me for who I am, not what I can supply. Sometimes, at quiet moments, I still feel the anguish of what should have been the family I deserved, but never received the love that should have been unconditional, but always came with strings attached. But then I recall standing outside in the cold on Thanksgiving Day, watching a family get together from which I had been purposefully left out. And I recall that when I left, I didn't lose anything. What you never truly had, you can't lose. To everyone who understands their own and my stories, who bears the unseen burden of being the one who is trusted, the one who provides without getting, and the forgotten one, you're worthy of more. You are deserving of attention, to be incorporated, to be valued for who you are, not for what you provide. And leaving doesn't always mean giving up. It's the realization that when you stop expecting others who never intended to fill the void left by love to do so, it hurts less. True family isn't usually bonded by blood, I've discovered. It is developed by deeds, by showing up when it counts, by treating people with respect and care, and by recognizing them for who they are rather than simply what they can provide. Boundaries aren't selfish, I've discovered. They are essential to survival. That refusing is not inhumane. You cannot burn yourself to keep others warm, especially when they would never do the same for you. This is an act of self-preservation. Above all, I've discovered that forgiveness that isn't earned doesn't lead to healing. It results from embracing the past, realizing that it wasn't your fault, and creating a life so full of sincere relationships that the lack of toxic love no longer seems like a gap. I am Noah, the unremembered son, the trustworthy one, the one who ultimately made his own decision, and my peace has never been greater.